I'm Liz Faubles, and this is Currents. How can you get involved in the Fortnight for Freedom? We'll tell you.
And so all throughout the diocese, parishes will be praying for renewed respect for religious freedom. That's going to happen in all our churches, every Sunday Mass, all the Masses during the next 14 days of the Fortnight for Freedom.
Plus, speaking out to save childcare and after-school programs.
They cannot balance the budget on the back of the children.
And the church is keeping pace with new media.
A good group here today, and I think they were here because they wanted to learn a little bit more about what Catholic magazines, websites are doing to kind of reach out to a younger generation of Catholics.
Good evening, and thank you for joining us. Our First Most Cherished Liberty is the title of a document released by U.S. bishops last month in response to a number of concerns they see as threats to religious liberty. At the top of the list, the Health and Human Services mandate, requiring most religious organizations provide contraception, sterilization, and some abortion-inducing drugs in their employee health plans. Now, the bishops are calling on Catholics to take action in the form of a Fortnight for Freedom from June 21st to July 4th to encourage prayer, education, and public action about religious freedom. Baltimore Archbishop William Lori, chairman of the U.S. Bishops Ad Hoc Committee for Religious Liberty, talked about that on Wednesday at the Bishops' Spring General Assembly in Atlanta.
The fortnight involves public action, yes, but it is primarily a matter of prayer and education.
Now, dioceses across the nation will organize events to rally for religious freedom, including right here in the Diocese of Brooklyn. Who can participate? Why should you get involved? What exactly is the Fortnight of Freedom, and what events are planned at local parishes? We thought it was important to answer these questions before the nationwide effort officially gets underway in earnest. I spoke with Monsignor Kieran Harrington, Vicar for Communications for the Brooklyn Diocese, for a deeper understanding of why the Fortnight for Freedom is so important. Monsignor, amid the controversy of so many attempts by the government to infringe upon religious freedom, and of course the HHS mandate being the most prevalent and raising the ire of U.S. bishops throughout the nation, when you first heard about the Fortnight for Freedom, what was your initial gut response?
Well, I think this is a great jumping off point to focus our attention on religious liberty, religious freedom. Clearly, our nation has a great history of respecting the right to worship. And nobody here is questioning that there is a right to worship that's not being infringed upon. But really, it's a question of conscience, living as we choose to live, that living according to the dictates of our faith. That's really what's at stake here. It's important to note that, certainly this is, the personification of this is in the HHS mandate. But you also see this challenge from the right with respect to the church's administration to people who are undocumented.
And you raise a point prior to our actually getting underway with this interview. This issue may not go away anytime soon, and we are ramping up efforts to voice our dissent for the issue. But what if this does go to the Supreme Court? What if it is ruled unconstitutional?
Well, I mean, we would expect that the Supreme Court is going to rule on the healthcare legislation in the next couple of weeks. So this may be a very interesting time where the Supreme Court might strike down nationalized health insurance. Question that I would have for the Obama administration is that the church has long been a supporter of national health insurance. We believe that all people should be covered. You would think that the president would want an ally from the church in this issue, and instead what he sought was really a fight over a relatively minor issue in terms of the impact is really minor for a lot of people. But he chose to take a very big issue, national health insurance, his centerpiece issue, and he chose to inject it with a sense of divisiveness that is really kind of questionable. You'd have to wonder what was his political judgment in that matter.
And the divisiveness does not work because all it did was serve to galvanize the church. If you'll just indulge me for a moment, this is a national effort. At Baltimore's Basilica of the National Shrine of the Assumption of the Blessed Virgin Mary, we're going to hear from Archbishop William Lori. He's going to offer a special mass. Cardinal Donald Wuerl of Washington and Archbishop Charles Chaput of Philadelphia, they're going to celebrate a mass on July 4th. We have Bishop Richard Malone of Portland also celebrating, and here, right in our own diocese, we're also galvanizing forces as well. Tell us a little bit about what we're going to be doing.
Well, I think the important thing is there are three components. The first thing is we ground everything in prayer, and so all throughout the diocese, parishes will be praying for renewed respect for religious freedom. That's going to happen in all our churches, every Sunday Mass, all the Masses during the next 14 days of the Fortnight for Freedom. Interestingly enough, the Fortnight starts on the feast of Sir Thomas More and Sir John Fisher. These were great martyrs for religious conscience. So it starts then, we begin praying about religious freedom. Why is this important for all of us who live in America? Second thing is that we realize that when we pray, that calls us in to do something, and that calls us to learn about the issue. So we got to make sure that we're informed on all the issues that are facing our nation. And lastly, we recognize that once we've prayed, once we've made sure we learned about something, that we're called forth into action. And so what we're going to be doing over the next 11 weeks is also doing a massive voter registration campaign, asking people who are coming to church to make sure you're registered to vote so that their voice can be heard on this very important issue, but on all issues that are important to people of faith.
And you mentioned earlier that a lot of this will coincide with the feast of really great martyrs. Is that by design or just by coincidence or divine intervention?
I think it's really by design. I mean, the 14 days that lapse between the celebration of the martyrdom of Sir Thomas More and John Fisher and our own national holiday, Independence Day. I mean, two very significant days. Our nation is founded upon the rights of man given to them not by government, but by Almighty God. And we have to be able to stand up and say to the present administration, and not simply to the present administration, also to forces that are on the right, and say, we live a certain way, we pray a certain way, and this calls us to behave in a certain way.
Monsignor, in the time that we have left, I want to read a quote by Bishop Malone, which really resonated with me. He said this issue of religious liberty affects all Americans. It's not a Catholic issue. It's not a Jewish issue. It's not an Orthodox, Muslim, Mormon issue. It's an American issue. In the time that we have left, can you address that statement and tell me what you feel about that?
Sure. Well, I mean, you know, all throughout the world there were confessional states, states where there was one specific religion and everyone had to adhere to that religion. The United States really kind of pioneers the way and says that no, people can choose the religion way in which they want to worship, but then not simply the way in which they want to worship, but also the way in which they want to live. This is an important value, not simply for our own country, but for what the United States has meant for the rest of the world.
Monsignor, I'm afraid we're out of time. We could talk about this forever. Hopefully we'll have you back to continue the discussion, maybe throughout the Fortnight for Freedom.
Great. Looking forward to it, Liz. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you for joining us. And stay tuned, there's more currents ahead. The day's headlines are next. Welcome back to Currents. I'm Liz Faublas. Physicians who are also religious sisters of Mercy of Alma are criticizing the Leadership Conference of Women Religious and its defenders for using an impoverished language of politics instead of the language of faith in its dialogue with the Catholic hierarchy at the Vatican. In their statement, the sisters' physicians say the language of politics arises from the social marketplace. The sisters who use political language in their responses to the magisterial church reflect the poverty of their education and formation in the faith. End quote. In April 2012, the Vatican's Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith released the results of a 4-year doctrinal assessment that determined that the Leadership Conference of Women Religious exhibited a, quote, crisis of belief and serious doctrinal problems. The audit also found that letters from conference officers suggested the presence of corporate dissent from church teaching on issues like the ordination of men to the priesthood and homosexuality. Well, the U.S. bishops who have been meeting in Atlanta this week have approved a proposal to draft a statement on work and the economy. They hope to raise awareness of the growing poverty and the struggles unemployed people are experiencing. Titled Catholic Reflections on Work, Poverty, and a Broken Economy, the message would advance the bishop's priority of human life and dignity to demonstrate the new evangelization in action. It's expected to be ready in time for a final vote at the bishop's fall meeting in November. Bishop Stephen Blair, chairman of the Bishop's Domestic Policy Committee, said that because poverty continues to grow and the economy continues to lag, now it is time to address the human and moral costs of the continuing economic crisis in a more public way. Well, at the Vatican, Pope Benedict XVI has expressed his continued concern for those who do not have enough food to eat. Rome Reports has that story.
The Pope met with the General Director of the UN's Food and Agriculture Organization, José Graciano da Silva, at the Vatican. During their short meeting, da Silva talked about strengthening the ties between the Holy See and the FAO, so together they can fight against world hunger. During their conversation, da Silva talked about the deep commitment the Church has in its fight against world hunger and poverty, especially in Africa. Da Silva then highlighted the global reach of the Church by asking it to renew its efforts in this mission. They also talked about the coming United Nations Conference on Sustainable Development, which will be held from June 20th to the 22nd in Rio, Brazil. Both of them also discussed their shared hope that rural communities once again will play a key role in the production and distribution of goods. The director visited the Pope along with 2 of his staff members. The FAO headquarters are in Rome. The director took on his new role on January 1st, 2012. His 3-year term will end on July 2015.
Also from the Vatican, Pope Benedict XVI has made an offer of reconciliation to the Society of St. Pius X, and the Vatican has prepared a document that would establish a personal prelature for the traditionalist group. Bishop Bernard Follet, the Superior General of the Society, will now weigh the Pope's offer. His response could be as simple as yes or no, or it could entail another round of discussions and negotiations. The Vatican and the traditionalist group have been in dialogue for years as Pope Benedict tries to heal the rift with the excommunicated traditionalist group. A new personal prelature would make the society only the second body to have that status within the Church. The other is Opus Dei. Ireland's Minister for Justice has determined that nothing should stand in the way of reporting the abuse of children or vulnerable adults, not even the sacred seal of confession. Alan Shatters said priests or bishops could not claim entitlements to the privilege if they were prosecuted for withholding information. Now that's because the legal basis for those claims no longer exists after the special position of the Catholic Church was removed from the state constitution, and that's according to the Irish Times. In April, the Irish Justice Minister evoked outrage from the Catholic Church by proposing 5-year prison sentences for priests who fail to report sex abuse of minors if they hear about it in the confessional. Cardinal Sean Brady, the Primate of Ireland, condemned the government's plan, saying the inviolability of the seal of confession is so fundamental to the very nature of the sacrament that any proposal that undermines it challenges the right of every Catholic to freedom of religion and conscience. Well, Catholics in the city of Harbin, China, have been praying and fasting in a last-minute effort to stop the ordination of a new bishop who does not have approval from the Vatican. Asia News reports that despite fierce opposition, the government-backed Catholic Patriotic Association, which does not recognize the authority of the Holy See in the affairs of the Church in China, will proceed with plans to ordain Father Joseph Yu Fusheng as bishop on June 29th. The Vatican has warned that any ordination that takes place without a mandate from the Holy See could lead to the bishop's excommunication. Bishops who ordain them and others who participate in the ceremony are subject to the same penalty. 2 priests in the group have already been ordained as bishops, in each case without Vatican approval. And finally tonight, an opportunity to perform for the Pope that was 2 years in the making, and for a talented group of young Mexican musicians, I think it may be safe to say it was worth the wait. More from Rome Reports.
Despite the distance, Mexico has always been close to the Vatican. During Wednesday's general audience, it became more obvious than ever. This group of young musicians is from Mexico. They all waited 2 years to play before the Pope, and finally, they got their chance.
De México, Banda de Música Leones de Veracruz.
The group is made up of 65 young musicians from the state of Veracruz. Seated at the Vatican's Paul VI Hall, they sang Canta y no llores in their traditional clothing. The young musicians are actually on tour through Europe, but they made it a point to stop at the Vatican to play before the Pope.
We came to tour in Belgium and France, but our main destination is the Vatican. It's a dream we've had for 2.5 years. It was our dream to come to Europe, which actually motivated us to work hard and improve. It has been a huge thrill and a lot of excitement.
It's very exciting to come here and sing and dance before the Pope. Even though the weather is very hot, it's worth it to play for someone as important as the Pope. It was only for a brief moment, but they say that memory will last a lifetime, since it's not very often that young musicians can say they played for the Pope.
When I looked at their faces, I saw that some of them had tears in their eyes. To hear the name of our group, it's something we had been waiting for an entire lifetime.
Ever since John Paul II was Pope, the color and music of Mexico has had a special place at the Vatican. And now the tradition continues under Benedict XVI.
And you might recall back in March, Pope Benedict donned a sombrero and was serenaded by a mariachi band during his historic papal visit to León, where Mexicans who called him their brother embraced him there. Stay tuned. There's more currents ahead. Coming up, it means a lot to these families. We'll hear how cuts to childcare programs could affect them.
Without the daycare, I would end up losing my job. I have no one to take care of my child, and I'm not the only one.
Welcome back. Families, elected officials, and several community-based organizations gathered at Borough Hall in downtown Brooklyn on Tuesday. The reason? To call on the mayor and the city council to restore funding for much-needed childcare and after-school programs. We were there and caught up with representatives from Catholic Charities, along with local leaders and the people most affected by those cuts, the families.
The purpose of this rally is to bring attention to the community about how the proposed cuts in funding to child care services and after-school programs is going to really hurt and have a negative impact on children and families that we serve in our programs in Catholic Charities.
This is unacceptable. They cannot balance the budget on the back of the children. The children, they are the future of the United States. They are the future of the society. It is our responsibility to do everything that we can do to provide to the children with the best education possible, including after-school programs.
The children count on these programs as a place to get their homework done, to get help with their subjects that they're struggling in, whether it be reading, math, or sciences, as well as to get opportunities to explore their skills in art, music, dance, and physical recreation, which is such a big need. And as the mayor talks about the need to cut down on high-calorie drinks, well, these programs provide real physical exercise for children through a variety of activities.
It allows you, many of you, to take a job, whether it's full-time or part-time. It enables your children to receive the adult supervision daycare programs that enrich their lives and give them the greatest opportunity in their lives.
There'll be many children and families who are not going to be able to get services that they need after July or after September of this year.
Without the daycare, I would end up losing my job. I have no one to take care of my child, and I'm not the only one.
Hundreds of young women that they depend on this center so they can have good care for their children and safe care.
I'm a single parent, yes I am. I'm a single parent and I do this alone. I have, little help from my parents whom are sick as well, but the daycare itself does so much for me.
The most important thing right now is that the city restore funding for these programs.
The cost of these programs is minor compared to what we're going to pay in future costs without these programs.
In addition to that, this is job opportunities. By closing after school, there are many people who are going to be laid off. And this is bad for New York City, this is bad for the children, this is bad for the families, and this is bad for the United States. We have to stand against that.
And stay tuned, there's more currents ahead. When we return, logging on and keeping up with new media.
Social media is a great tool for communication, but there's also an inherent level of some of the social media that really can often be really shallow.
Finally tonight, the Vatican is trying to control a new internet domain. The corporation that assigns those names announced that the Holy See has applied for ownership of the domain .Catholic. The head of the Pontifical Council for Social Communication says the move recognizes how important the digital space is for the Church. And the news should come as no surprise, since both the Church and its people are increasingly communicating by electronic means. At a recent Theology on Tap in Brooklyn Heights, a couple of Catholic journalists talked about the current media landscape.
We're here tonight for Theology on Tap at Amon's Bar in Brooklyn Heights, and we're going to talk about Catholicism and young adults in the media today. We have Tim Reedy and we have Bill McGarvey, and they both deal with communications and media.
We live in a dialogic world where you say this and I say this back, and then this person over here says that. There's voices coming from everywhere.
It's very important at my age to stay connected with everyone. It's the popular thing to do.
The Catholic identity has been dispersed, and you're in a competition. We're in competition, really. We're in competition with everything, with people's jobs, their school, their girlfriends and boyfriends, their Facebook account, their Twitter account.
In the days of St. Paul, of course, they were very limited in the ways that they can communicate. It was either, in person or often by an oral tradition. Now there are, myriad ways to communicate, but in many ways things are the same in that the message is the same. So the challenge is how to adapt the message to the new media.
To me, a lot of what my work has always been about is about trying to see this faith in the context of the world we live in, and to have people give them the eyes and the lens through which to see a faith experience.
I personally prefer to get my email and think about it, and I respond right away. And when you do that, I think it removes the passion from it, so perhaps people can think more clearly.
We had a good group here today, and I think they were here because they wanted to learn a little bit more about what Catholic magazines, websites are doing to kind of reach out to a younger generation of Catholics.
We talked about tonight the dialogue of faith, the people interacting on the internet, the people sharing ideas, people having discussions. If we're not there, then the Church is kind of left out of that.
Would Jesus go out there and get a Twitter? I think he would. I think if that was going to get people to come to the faith, he would do it.
We are a Catholic enterprise, yes, but one that is engaged with the larger world and looking at the larger world and trying to bring a Catholic perspective to it.
When Jesus was able to go down to the Sea of Galilee and pick up fishermen, we need to go to Facebook and Twitter and grab people and bring them to Christ.
The idea was that we wanted to look at church issues, of course, but also kind of beyond the church, and to bring the lens of the Catholic faith to the outside world.
Social media is a great tool for communication, but there's also an inherent level of some of the social media that really can often be really shallow. I mean, 140 characters is what you have on Twitter, I think, right? I mean, you can't get across the gospel in 140 characters.
I think there's definitely way more value in telling someone face-to-face of God's love for them, loving someone, obviously, person to person, sharing your faith with them person to person. But that doesn't mean it's not important, again, to be a presence in social networks, to be a presence online.
Social media is not the only answer to dwindling numbers in the pews, but I do think pretty strongly that it is part of the solution to at least reaching out and helping people rediscover church.
And that is all for tonight. Coming up on Friday, the latest from the International Eucharistic Congress in Ireland as Brooklyn's own Bishop Frank Caggiano prepares to speak there. Until then, be sure to visit us online at currentsny.net. We are also on Facebook and Twitter. For all of us here at Currents, I'm Liz Faubles. We leave you tonight with scenes from the Vatican on Wednesday, where a mariachi band played the gig of a lifetime, an audience with Pope Benedict. Thank you for watching and have a good night.